Hello, everyone, and welcome to New Polity Podcast. I'm Alex Denley here with Dr. Andrew Jones.
Hello.
So about a year ago, we had a podcast, Pope Leo, on Leo the 13th, because Leo the 14th had just been elected, and now we have his first encyclical about a year later.
Yeah.
And so on AI is how it's been promoted. This is the AI encyclical.
Right.
However, AI plays kind of the occasion role. It's the main subject of the middle part, we could say. Interestingly, we have the first few chapters on social doctrine, and then this final chapter on war,
Right.
and this multipolar situation, the normalization of war. So in this podcast, we're going to go through the encyclical, particularly with a political philosophy angle, because I think there's a lot of things interesting there. Of course, he sets this up also within an Augustinian narrative, so two cities, which has been a standard for your work,
Right.
both in the two cities before church and state. So maybe where we could begin, something we were just discussing before, is the political philosophy here in the encyclical, and particularly the role of private corporations, transnational corporations, and in our time, these tech conglomerates,
Right.
having a extremely outsized influence on the political order. So maybe we could begin there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that our discussion of politics for the last couple hundred years has been hamstrung by by the theory of the state, right? Or like an understanding that politics is something that is monopolized by nation states, right? And we forget it's been such a long narrative or such a long discourse surrounding nation states that we forget that itself was a historical phenomenon that came into being, right, in the early modern period, and then became sort of perfection perhaps at 1914, right, and then has been changing ever since. But the idea that politics is something that nation states are these things that are recognizable as juridical, army wielding and police force wielding centralized entities that have formal governing structures and formal democratic or parliamentarian or whatever their order is, governing apparatus, that this is where politics happens. Right. And that's a historical phenomenon, and it made political theory easy in some ways, but also totally capable of completely missing the actual political question. Right. So one of the things I think that Leo is doing here, and it may be even a somewhat subtle point for some people, but the very structure of the encyclical, where you have laying out the principles of Catholic social teaching, which must ultimately be understood as the principles of just politics.
Yes.
Right. And then laying out the AI situation, where we're now not talking about states anymore. Right. The states are only one player and a relatively minor player in a lot of ways in the AI digital situation, right? They're part of it, but they're not it.
No.
Right? And so what I'm saying is that one of the things that the Pope is doing is showing that those principles of Catholic social teaching are applicable not only to state actors, but to anywhere where power is wielded. So that idea that the de facto or the reality of power is what determines the political actors, not formal governmental structures like we're used to. But the question the question actually becomes much simpler in some ways, which is, does an entity have the power to affect the structure or the course of life or the value systems or the whatever? Do they have the ability to affect the social reality on the ground? If so, that's a political actor.
Right. So the political is not limited to So the power and the common good, power is meant for the common good, but powers in a early 20th century, late 19th century mode, you would say, okay, well, the state is the one that has power, and that's what we're talking about with politics.
Yeah.
But in fact, it's transnational private companies that seem to, they are the ones that have power, and so they are political actors.
Yeah, and then we can go a little bit. We if we want to be rigorous here, we need to break down the categories. It's not that we're saying it used to be that the state had the political power, and now something else has the political power, right? Like it used to be the state had the political power, and then you had companies that didn't have any, and now you have companies that have political power, and the state is not. Because if you think about it that way, you're holding the categories fixed. You're just rearranging who has power. But really, what we want to do is say the categories don't hold. You see what I'm saying? So like the interests. The structures, the economic and governmental structures are different and are merged together, right? So there are these other. There's many entities, companies, media conglomerates, whatever. There's governments. There's many entities, but they themselves are a part of a governing structure. Right. So if you think about like the feudal system where you could have many entities, you could have all the way from the common knight up to the king and the church and the bishops and many, many entities, all that have power in their own fields in certain regards.
Right, in their own mode.
But in order to understand the political reality of the society as a whole, you've got to pull all that together and look at it as a structure. Right. And then you can see the political reality. And so when we look at our world, that's what we need to do. We need to stop thinking that it's the state, right? And especially the nation state, that is the umbrella under which everything else is ordered. Like it's the architectonic power. It's like, no, that's the architectonic power is now shifting into to reside within a structure that's more really in a lot of ways more feudal in its in the way we might try to designate it than the old nation states are.
And Leo really foregrounds that in the beginning paragraphs. And in paragraph 5, he says, as Pope Francis warned, we must realistically ask ourselves who holds power today and how they use it. Today, the main drivers of development are private, often transnational parties that are endowed with resources and the capacity to intervene that surpass those of many governments. Technological power thus takes on an unprecedented, predominantly private aspect, which makes it even more challenging to discern, govern, and direct such power towards the common good. This is paragraph 5 right in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I think It's great. I mean, it's correct, but you see, you get in these weird traps where like you're forced to use the language of the past in order to describe what's going on, and then you get into a problem like the whole public-private distinction, right? You know, it's like, well, the public-private distinction was a distinction that made sense within the nation-state world, the nation-state combined with the market economy, right? Like that thing. But we know, looking back on it, that those are two categories within a single structure, a single political economic structure. They're not absolute essential categories, right? We know by looking back at the history that the political space was full of public interest, or the political space was full of private interest. The private space is full of political interest. I mean, that's the way it was. It's the way it's always been, and that's still the case. So when we say private, we got to be really careful, right? Because I'm not sure that they're private. I mean, I'm not sure. It's not like, again, I want us to get away from this idea that what we're seeing are big, powerful companies that are controlling governments, right? It's like, no, the line between, say, the intelligence services and the corporations and the propaganda and the marketing and the military and these are blurred and
the banks and the tax
the banks
spending.
and you have to put it all into you have to shift the way you think about it to see what I think the classics would refer to as an oligarchic form, right? Where economic power and political power are merged into a class that controls both, right? And so it's or are contending to control both. I mean, it's not like some sort of seamless thing. I mean, it's history, so it's full of conflict. But
so they constitute a and in a certain way like an unaccountable apparatus. So meaning if we're still stuck in, let's say, nation state idea, like we'll just elect the good guy, you know. Whereas the actual operations of power are unaccountable, and I think we could take private maybe in that way, or in a sense that there's
certainly non-democratic.
So
they may be accountable to each other, right? So what you may be seeing is a shrinking of the political. Okay, so and this is something that maybe this is too tangential. You correct me if we need to get back on topic here, but when you look at say Aristotelian political theory, and there's the understanding that there's a citizen class who are the ones who shape policy, who are the ones who control the city. But part of the way that they control the city is through the maintenance of the structures that keep the great mass of the non-citizen class working, doing the things they need to do in order to maintain the self-sufficiency of the city. And that citizen class is where the political discourse is occurring on what we should or should not do, how we ought to govern. And it's also where the military power resides, right? So he says the citizen class has to be big enough and has to be proper enough that it has the power to control, to enforce the self-sufficiency of the city, meaning control the masses. All right, so that's why Aristotle zeroes in on like the hoplite soldier kind of middle, and is like that's the place where you want the citizen class to sort of be, because that's where the military strength is, right? Okay, so my point is that though there's an accountability within that citizen class, but it's not accountable to the great mass of workers. Do you see? They operate, in fact, in a world. They operate in fact, I think different worlds, but. So when we say it's unaccountable, I think that what we need to say is that the citizen or the ruling class as a whole is not accountable to anyone else, but they have rules and accountability within themselves, right? And they're just no longer democratic. I mean, I think we can see this very clearly with like the domestication of Donald Trump. It's like, well, the decision to allow Donald Trump into the ruling class, which was made sometime before the last election, right, is that he has to conform to the rules, which he has since done.
Yeah, I mean, just look who was at his inauguration.
And that was the deal, right? The deal, it's like, okay, and so he's accountable to the citizen class. Once we, like if you think of the citizen class as the ones who are involved in the discourse that determines the political order.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. I think there are a number of just like elite versus elite wars that happen, and we kind of can see them, from afar. Of course, we're not a part of any of them. And between like the AI build out, the data center rush, the race to get as many data centers as possible, it's XAI and Meta and all the rest of them trying to build as quickly as possible to go, who's going to control AGI, wars against each other.
Yeah, sure.
But all this to say, the nation state isn't the locus of it at this point, right?
No,
the nation state is, and this is
but not entirely not unimportant. I mean, it's not.
No, right.
It's very much a part of the structure.
Yeah, I brought up in previous podcast on the Iran War the passage from Parchmentari's John the 23rd that the modern nation state is incapable of caring for the global common good. And that was 1963. So we've been in this mode for a while, and so we're dealing with a what in social teaching at Paul VI introduced this term of technocracy into social teaching, which is rule by technology or the ones developing the technology, and And actually, maybe we could take it in those two aspects, that there are both technocrats, so ones who control technology, but the technology as such changing the space of the social order, or increasingly that machines that are means of communication with each other, something we were discussing, is mediated and controlled through technology. And I think in that first aspect, we're talking about the elites. The second aspect, how technology becomes the means of our action in the world or our operating in the world, I think that's also present here in the Encyclical, like maybe on communication.
It's very important, yeah, the idea. So technocracy, again, I think that we sometimes oversimplify the conversation and then miss the real meat. So it's not, when you think about what I think, when I think about technocracy, what I want us to talk about or think about it is not that we have a world, this sort of pre-existing natural open world that has laws and ways it behaves and all of that, and then we design machines, and the technocracy is the control of the machines in that world. Mm-hmm. Right, like as it, I hope that makes some degree of sense. Like it's not just a sort of power in an open space that's unpowered, that's uncontrolled. Right, mm-hmm. That's not the right way to think about it. The right way to think about it is that a technocracy is a regime form and the building of one is the attempt to and it exists to the extent that this is achieved, to move the space in which society lives into the machine. Right? So it's not that you have the society out there and you're governing it with machines. That's actually just a sort of war, a sort of conquest war footing. Like you have a whole space that's not conquered, mm-hmm. and the machines are subduing it. All right. Right. That's expansion, or sort of the colonialism of the technocracy. The technocracy is the space that's already been conquered. You see, so the space that comes inside, and now the social space that now functions within the technocratic apparatus. Okay, and that so I mean, I'm sure that sounds very abstract, but it.
Right. Well, the goal of using the machine, so let's say conquer the space, is to incorporate it into the machine.
The machine,
right?
Right.
So the social machine,
so the
machine that you control.
That's right.
Okay.
So the machine, it's the society itself becomes mechanized. But that doesn't mean, it's not like a 19th century sort of like planning and organization and socialism, mm-hmm. and all that kind of stuff that the libertarians are always arguing about. Right? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about creating a world, a microcosm, a world within the world, where the rules, the generalized rules, are a part of human construction. So the rules that govern human behavior now are not natural rules or God-given laws or whatever, we mm-hmm. want to talk about it, but are now laws that that fall within the architects of the world, like within their control. Okay, so it's not like you're doing away with spontaneous order, decision-making, value, like evaluations on value, and all the sorts mm-hmm. of things that allow for order within some sort of spontaneous order. That can still exist. It does still exist. It's necessary, but it is now occurring within a frame that is artificial. Okay, which is an artifice. I mean, literally artificial, like a piece of human ingenuity. So you mentioned communication, and that's where you can see this very, very clearly, right? That when communication between human beings is primarily out in an open world. So let's talk about like two guys standing on a sidewalk talking to each other, right? Out in an open world where we're actually talking to each other, then the communication is something that lies, the actual active communication lays beyond the technocratic world. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so that means that what the technocrats have to do is, if they're building a technocracy, is attempt to affect the opinion formation, or through propaganda, through control of the newspapers, through these, right? There's this sort of like intruding aspect. It's like the billboards that are like violent to your world, right? Like there's a you see like it's like it's
Sure.
intervention into a space that's outside of it, right? And attempting to affect it. But when you move that communication into the technocracy, right, now you don't have to manipulate it extrinsically, right? Now it's occurring within the structure. So you can control it in you can control that discourse in a much more profound level. I mean, literally, like, just so you can just like delete things you don't like. I mean,
Yeah.
But that's a very crude and brutal form, right? Like that's something we saw with COVID and with other stuff, that kind of crude form of censorship, we call it, I guess. But you go well beyond that. I mean, it moves into the kind of algorithmic control of the discourse that makes some aspects of the discourse visible and therefore current, other aspects invisible, and therefore
just
disappear.
Right.
I mean, and they literally just don't exist. And maybe they exist in little niches, but who cares about the little niches, the little groups of chattering,
Right. So just to restate, I mean, we just imagine a face-to-face conversation, communication, that is an open and not, it potentially could go anywhere. You're just talking to someone.
Right.
Now, I'm sure we've, might have had the experience of talking to someone who just repeats like a Fox News like talking point on the political
and what's
stuff, right?
and what's your take when you hear that? It's like,
it's
I'm
like
not
I'm
really
not
having
actually having a conversation with the
Right.
person. I'm actually just getting the distilled version of a propagandistic TV show. But it's still an open space. So the space of communication in a face-to-face interaction, which for the longest time was how a lot of communication worked, and the building of a world and communication and so forth. However, that space is now just an online conversation through social media, through a number of other online channels, and those are owned spaces and much more. Now, instead of having two persons, which in the ideal have their own experiences and ideas that can converse, build the world, what we have is a controlled space where each individual is hooked into the conversation, the communication, right? But they're all operating within the same apparatus that can be wielded to. All right, now we're doing environmentalism, which is like 2012, 16, so forth. Or now it's all COVID, or now it's now it's all AI. Now it's whatever. You can just turn the conversation and control the space in which communication occurs.
Right.
Which Pope Leo brings out in
unbelievable
paragraphs 135 through 138. He has this section called "Toward an Ecology of Communication." And I'll just read this. The content that circulates within digital environments shapes how people perceive the world and introduces into the collective consciousness images and narratives that direct our desires and influence our daily choices. This is not a parallel or purely virtual world, since what originates online now becomes a part of people's lives, especially of the youngest.
It's more real than the world outside your door. That's what I mean. What I mean by that is that the world outside the door is interpreted through the communication, the matrix. It's interpreted. It's reality. What it means is interpreted through the technocratic regime, right? So you brought up environmentalism, and that's just a great example. It's been something I've been marveling about in the last few years. Like, whatever happened to climate change? It's like I just, like, people maybe forget. I mean, It was the biggest and most important thing. I mean, the universities and the UN and all the political leaders in the Obama era and then all the way through.
Totally.
I mean, it was like the science is settled and you're a climate denier. And it was the thing, existential crisis. The whole world needs to change in order to deal with it. It's gone.
Oh, conveniently when we're building AI data centers.
And it's just like, well, what happened to it?
Yeah.
And it's like, literally gone. Like, I think like the UN has derated it as like an emergency. I mean, why? Well, because it's not in the interests of people anymore. And so the money has dried up and the communication has stopped. And so all the whole apparatus that we're talking about, which remember, I'm talking about nonprofit organizations, you're talking about the university systems, you're talking about the corporations, you're talking about the nation states, you're talking about the whole apparatus stops and then it's gone. And in the course of a year, the masses of people who were so worked up about it have already forgotten about it.
Yeah, and they're being worked up about something else.
Yeah. But like,
well, and something you brought up too with the
it's amazing.
The last podcast we did on the Iran war, like where are the
protesters?
Where are the protests?
I mean, this is Donald Trump attacking a Islamic country that didn't attack us. You would expect massive, this is what democracy looks like, chanting protests from his political enemies. And it's just like crickets. And again, it's like, why? Well, because the communication machine hasn't turned it on. And so what you're seeing is what I'm talking about, that governing, that citizen class, that there's a conversation happening. There is one happening, right? It's just not the one it's not the one that is being engaged in by the mass of people. And so it's not, so what you're seeing is the shifting of politics away from anything that could be construed as democratic politics and towards oligarchic politics. It's still politics. It's still there, right? I mean, like their decisions are being made. People are having fights, right? And it's just no longer where we are. And now when I say we, I mean the mass. I don't mean that there isn't conversation happening. I'm meaning that it's obscure and relatively unimportant, right? Yeah,
and it increasingly too, it becomes a taking side in an elite war. So meaning you have your champion elite, right? So you say my elite is this, and he's fighting the other elites that I don't like. But I don't think there's not there's this illusion that that's what it means to have a democratic and free people, is to choose which elite you want to rule the world instead of other elites. It's so strange.
Well, I just think it's the idea of communication, of discourse, is so central. When you look at again, let's go to Plato, Aristotle. That what makes human beings the political animal is that we're the linguistic animal. Right? We talk, and that means we discuss the true and the false, the just and the unjust, the good and the bad. And in those discourses, the political world, the sort of rules, the boundaries, the structure of the political world are built in the discourse of what is true and what is false and what is good and what is bad. And that's the reason why, like what Pope Leo says in the Encyclical, is that truth is the common good, right? Like truth ultimately is the common good. And that's the thing then. Truth is a thing then that we're working toward. So you could think about how you can do this two different ways. You can turn this machine around. So you have discourse between people that is working towards truth. Okay, so free discourse that works towards truth. And that's a people that forms a people in their discourse, and the common good of truth and the mode or the manner in which they pursue truth is their culture. Right? Okay, but you can invert that where you say truth. It's not that we're working to truth and therefore building a culture. It's that truth will be proposed, and then the culture and the discourse is backfilled. right? And so we're still going to have the components. It's just which direction is it moving? So that's the technocratic direction is the direction, the backwards movement, right? That we have the truth, and now we're going to construct the discourse, right? That justifies it. All you have to do is listen to Sean Hannity to see this in work, right? Where like the truth is fluid and is moving, and it's obviously coming from without, and then he spends his days backfilling the discourse, right? And he's a clown.
Yeah, you have the settled truth, and then it's marketing basically. Yeah. It's so the communication space becomes a controlled marketing space that it doesn't seem apparent to people, and it gives you this feeling of participating. It gives you this feeling as if
all of it,
you're in the know.
The outrage, the conviction, all of it is there. Yeah,
right.
The belonging,
and it's that's been around for a while. It's just so intensified. I mean, the television. I mean, the television also had this effect where it was the thing said on the news that was the direct conversation, and then you would converse about the thing you saw on the TV. But what was there in a kind of seed form is just so advanced and controlled at this stage, and we haven't even gotten to the AI control of the space. The manner of social control at a mass scale, purely from the communication side, we could talk about other manners of control. Is on a scale we've never seen in human history.
Not even comparable. I mean, it's not even conceivable. I mean, this is the entire. Like the entire Hayek, I'm going to talk about Hayek. Is that okay? I've been reading Hayek again. But Hayek's, the Austrian economist. I mean, most of I think probably our listeners are familiar with who he is. Okay. And if you're going to like narrow down his central insight, right, in most of his work is the knowledge problem. Is the idea that coordination. The world is too complex. It's too complex. There's too many variables, and there's too many differing values, like relative values in the world. So different people have different desires, different values. The organization, there's too many variables that could be organized in too many different ways. The world is too complex for any sort of planning or any sort of significant planning or detailed planning. And so what needs to occur, or what actually occurs, and then what should be fostered, is that there's a spontaneous order, or a spontaneous a growing of an order through free action and interactions with each other, and the way that allows for decisions to be made without any one person making the decision, or without any one actor understanding all the variables, but what it depends on is the idea that you have a controlled space of general rules, right? So this is the whole libertarian thing, right? Like a controlled space of general rules of property rights, of contract, of control, of generalized rules within which the spontaneous order can form and develop. But those generalized rules are chosen. I mean, Hayek, it's like the reason we should have economic liberalism is because it's the best. But we could have different rules. I mean, and it's a political question as to which rules we're going to have, right? But the whole, and that means that his whole idea of like the free society was predicated on the idea that the world itself is what's being governed, like the world outside the front door, which is way too complex and has way too many possibilities within it.
Right. To give rules for all of it.
You have to have very general rules because the world is way too variable in its behaviors and its possibilities. But okay, and there's some profundity to that, right? I mean, but what happens when the world becomes simpler? Right? What happens when the world, it's not like, okay, if I want to control and I'm facing Hayek's problem, I can either attempt to build an apparatus that's capable of corralling the real world, or I could change the world, right? Like I could bring the world into a manageable a configuration.
Yeah, moving the world out the front door into the house,
into the virtual world, and now the world's actually very simple. It's just data points. I mean, there's a lot of it, right? There's a lot of data, but that's just a computing problem, right? Like now the world is inside, and I can now the rules I produce, the rules I produce within which human beings act, can become tighter and tighter and tighter, right? And so it's still the case that human beings are moving around and acting and doing things, but they're now doing things within a world that is that those generalized rules are ever more constraining, right? And therefore more capable of like direct control. I mean, you could see this already. We could see this very principle already with, say, China, where the space of spontaneous human action very much still exists, right? I mean, think about like their economic reality and the way like it very much exists, but it exists within a different framing, a different general rule structure than the United States. And it's like it's perfectly possible to have a whole space of spontaneous decision-making, price mechanisms, the whole thing, right? Like consumerism, all of that can exist within a different set of generalized rules, as long as they're generalized. I mean, I think that's what would be Hayek's. I mean, I think he would have to see that as being true at this point. And so moving you see what I'm saying, is moving the complexity of the real world, which is infinitely complex.
Yes.
Into a world that's no longer infinitely complex, but is now below human, the ability for human beings to understand. It's all understandable to us. It just there's just a lot of it, right? But that's where AI and the other stuff comes in, is because now it no longer has to be that a human mind is attempting to sort through, categorize, organize, corral all of that data, right? But now you can have artificial minds. I mean, if we want to call them that, that are themselves operating under general guidelines, and then they go about organizing or orchestrating, building, maintaining, redirecting that rule structure.
Yes, and just to restate, another example like Fukuyama, with the idea that the capitalism's not great, but it's the best we have, kind of structure. So meaning there's a that the world is too complex,
right,
to have this totalitarian impulse to control everything by trying to bring the entire world and fit it into your machine system. So having a liberal capitalistic structure is the end of history, because we can't think of anything better than this, because we make a general rule set that everyone follows. So Hayek is saying, okay, well, you have general rules, but the world is still outside the door, and there is something out there. What is wild with AI, what potentially makes it like something that liberal capitalism couldn't anticipate, or we couldn't see it as a development, is that you could categorize and get enough data on the real world to start simplifying it to the point where you could give those specified rules and orientation and control of communication.
Yeah.
Like all of that is now possible.
That's what I mean. Like the general rules become less general. You know what I mean? It's like, or maybe they become even more general with specific applications. So you say things like, the general rule is that you should, I don't know, consume meat moderately. I'm just making something up.
Sure.
I don't know. Right? That's the generalized rule. And then it's like, but that's different for every person, and the machine will.
Well, right. Okay.
The machine's going to enforce the general rule.
Well, let's just take the example. So, consume meat moderately.
Yeah,
okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. Well, if you gave the generalized rule, okay, and you could ask like who it comes from or whatever. How do you make it a cultural and social force that people consume meat moderately and don't eat 5 hamburgers a day or something.
Yeah.
There's maybe you use TV and you get talking heads to talk about we need to consume meat, moderately. And then you make it a social push somehow, or you do some type of like
some billboards.
Yeah, some billboards maybe.
Yeah.
Now you know all of the eating habits of, they have this type of data. Like, what do you consume? They also, there's a controlled space of, you can make a whole social media, kind of invent it out of thin air. You could do that. You could, there are so many more manners of making this thing real, of making that general rule real.
You could actually map like the instances where people were consuming too much and then stopped. And then like, well, how did we get from A to B? And you run all the data and you figure it all out and you construct the algorithms that get that. And then you start working on the populations that are problematic, through all that could be automated. What I mean is that it's not, that's a kind of a silly example. I don't think, because honestly, it's kind of a misleading example because it is, we would maybe think it has something to do with health or something, but it would have to have something to do with money or power. But maybe that does have something to do with money or power in some way. But anyway, those what I'm trying to assert is that those mechanisms in the technocratic reality, in the world that's built, disappear. So it becomes, what I mean is it's not like we feel intervention because it still hasn't conquered, right? But once it has, you perceive it like it's nature. Okay, so for example, a great example would be like, maybe it's a great example, I don't know, that's what comes to mind, is the way when say enclosure was going on in the early modern period, the enclosures of the commons, and that felt horribly intrusive to the peasantry, right? Like there was something grossly unjust or something intrusive going on, right? Where the commons were becoming private property. But that went on for long enough, for enough centuries into the capitalistic model and everything, to where we live in a world where there are no commons. Everything is private property, and that seems completely natural to everybody. Like the vast majority of people, it never even occurs to them that that it's even possible that something wouldn't be owned. Of course, everything's owned, right? And so you see that, and now the world that they live in occurs within that general rule set. Everything's owned. There's an owner to everything, right? That's not the way it used to be, but now it feels like that's the way just the world is. Our world now lives in that space. So what I mean is that as the AI world advances, the digital world with that level of control will become the air. It'll be, it won't be.
When you have a previous referent, like you know the time before, you can relativize it, or you can say there is an other world you've experienced. Once it's your world for a next generation, that my generation being the one that really came up with smartphones coming out.
Yeah.
But for the next one with AI chatbots, that is just their world. The level of data collection and so forth, no one even considers that anymore as being like I don't want them to collect my data. But the world is an intensification of what came before it in terms of the understanding of the data, the manufacture of machine created owned spaces, communication being owned. And maybe where we could move from here, before we get to more of the positivity on like subsidiarity, because I definitely want to get to that a lot here on that. We were discussing this idea of the critical mass problem of politics.
Yeah.
And AI's relation to the critical mass problem. And I wondered if you could
explain
what that problem is.
In a lot of ways, we've already been sort of circling that problem. But there's one of the dominant problems of politics is sometimes I think of it as a critical mass problem. Sometimes I think of it as like the inside-outside problem. But the point of it is that there's the power. So if you have, let's say the power. Plato talks about this in the Republic, like the power of a group of men to subdue another group of men. All right, and it's like, well, the rules or the methods of subduing another group of men can't be the methods. Creating some sort of order between these two groups of men, right? The one that's been subdued and the one who subdued them. The method or the logic of that can't be the same as the logic that produces the order inside the strong group. Do you see? Like, so you have and so what we're getting at is that the strong group, there's some political cohesion or some notion of justice, or we were talking about in terms of discourse, or there's something that is binding together a group that, according to its own rationale, that then gives it the strength to defend itself or to conquer others or to hold others in subjugation. So the problem politically has been that, let's say you're a tyrant and you want to be a tyrant. Okay, well, you want to hold a large population in subjugation and extract tribute from them. Well, you need to figure out how do you organize a military, an army, and a police force that will do that, right? What is the inside? What binds the guys on the inside, right? And so you get and this can be very, very complicated, right? You can get nationalist ideologies, you can get different ideological structures. You can think about trying to bind it through rewards, greed, like mercenary type stuff. There's all different ways of doing it, and any given political order can have multiple ways and different layers. The police could be integrated in certain ways, and the army in a different, it can be a very complicated reality. But you have to have a certain critical mass of trigger pullers. Right?
Right.
And there's always likewise there's therefore a balance or a relation between the subjugation, the people being subjugated, and the ones subjugating. And there's only so much power that can be extracted from the inside group by higher levels within it before they transition to part of the subjugated class. Do you see what I'm saying? And so you can there's this balance point where you don't have enough men anymore, and then you lose. Right. Okay. Right. So the problem.
So your inside group keeps shrinking and shrinking because you're subjugating more
and more. And this is the problem.
And you don't have a law or a rule that can incorporate enough of the one subjugating to subjugate this amount of people.
Right. Yeah. Or resources or whatever. This amount of territory and the people on it. And so you have this sort of dance, or this is the tyrannical problem, right? And this goes all the way back to the Greeks. Plato talks about this in the collapse of the regime forms, and ultimately the tyrant falls because he's alone and he has no more friends. Okay, right, and this is like the inevitable collapse of the tyrannical regime because you can't maintain the friend group. Mm-hmm. Okay, so but the point I'm trying to get at here is that in modern politics, because of the formation of mass war and modern warfare and modern economics, this problem has been exasperated or has been, you go back to the French Revolution on, the drive has been to increase the insiders. Like, we need more. These aren't just peasants working in the fields anymore. Now they're citizens. Right. They're soldiers, and they think of Napoleon,
and they're patriotic.
They're patriotic, and they're invested in the power of the nation. And you have the desire to expand, not just the kind of knightly elite class that's insiders or the aristocrats, but to expand that mass of rulers, in a sense, or citizen class, right? And that's the democratic impulse, which is what led ultimately to the phenomenal power of the 20th century armies, right? Is the democratic, and I don't mean voting, I mean the democratic form. Mm-hmm.
The masses in the trenches in World War
One, yeah, and that they're somehow a part of the governing apparatus, right? And okay, but one of the things that is becoming clear to me, I think, is that dynamic is flipping on its head. Okay, so with AI, and with surveillance, with AI, which go together, obviously, like the hardware and then the ability to process the data and make sense of it, and then the drones, the robots, and what we see in the war in Ukraine, what we've seen in the war in Iran, where the coercive apparatus itself is no longer necessarily relies upon massive amounts of people who've bought in. Do you see what I mean? Like fewer and fewer people can start to control the coercive apparatus. Mm-hmm. So now you have this kind of perfect storm where you have the culture forming apparatus, the communication culture forming apparatus is increasingly controllable. And then on the outskirts of that, which is where you have actual military action, coercive action, which is the attempt to expand the technocracy or to subdue those who are resisting it. Right. That itself doesn't require a mass of people who have bought in. Right. So the distinction, what I mean is, like, it's increasingly the case that the distinction between home and foreign can lose significance, right? The coercive apparatus that guards the boundaries of the technocracy are operative in both places without the need for a large number of people to believe in it. Now, I think most people will, because the control of the technocratic, the communications apparatus will produce conformity, right? Mm-hmm. But to the people who resist it, they won't require like police forces and armies and right. And like, well, how are we going to get those guys to go do this? And it's like, well, I mean, it's just not an issue. You have.
It kind of goes back to the point you were raising with communication and the data collection there, because one of the reasons you need those police forces and so forth is to figure out what the people are doing. Yeah, exactly. Like the fear of friendship in a tyranny, which Plato's talked about, and we talked about in our previous series.
St. Thomas, yeah.
It's because you're afraid of what they're talking about.
That's absolutely right.
Like you're afraid they might be conspiring. You're afraid they might be resisting a regime. Right. You're afraid they might be subverting things, and so you got to start. Well, you got to break down doors. You got to just try to find where they're meeting and break down their doors and figure out, put them in, interrogate them. You don't need that anymore.
No,
you don't need to break down doors. All the communication's already happening in a space that you can look at.
Right.
And if going back, that the shared discourse is what builds the political order. Uh-huh. In that point, you do have a shrinking of the political, because it's a machine-like controlled space.
Right. Yeah. And even the military power shrinks dramatically.
Right. You don't need as I mean,
that was always the big check in the modern world. Right. Was that you had to have some kind of democratic impulse within your regime, because you had to be able to deploy millions of men and supply them all. Mm-hmm. Right. But if that problem goes, man, I mean, all bets are off. Who knows what happens?
Yeah. And in the modern wars, it's interesting with, in World War I and World War II, it was masses and masses of soldiers. By the time you get to World War II, it becomes even more industrial capacity. So you have millions of soldiers, but the machines that the soldiers use, the weapons that they use, the systems that they use, start to have a more outsized influence. So you can have a smaller group of fighting forces that conquer more and more territory with that. That whole process is just continued. So, we have our, the modern U.S. policy of shock and awe, which is we have all these amazing things. We bomb the crap out of you, and then you surrender, right?
Yeah, right.
Because you realize we have all these amazing weapons, and we did a similar thing with Iran. But what AI and automation and drones and surveillance, all the rest of it makes possible, you can accomplish all of those same ends with far less people. And and to bring it to the critical mass problem, then I think we could foresee, even if it's far in the future, a single tyrant or maybe he's controlled by an automated system who can rule millions of people.
Conceivably, yeah.
Conceivably could rule millions of people with a handful of insiders. Like it makes that type of tyranny possible, again, for first time in human history. If all the automations are algorithmically controlled, it might be it could be the first time that critical mass thing is surmountable.
Yeah, but the weird irony is it may occur that sort of singularity of power may occur at the same moment that the control of communication is so seamless that no one notices. I mean, you know what I mean? Like that may be, yeah. I mean, we may not be imagining a world of restive resistance. You're imagining a world of just compliance.
You know, this is why, again, this encyclical has been kind of, people are talking about it as the AI encyclical, and people read the middle section. But it's so interesting, the framing, because this whole last section is on war.
Right.
And just in broad strokes, part of what he brings out is the multipolar situation. So we have these global superpowers, U.S., China, Russia, that have this, and I think we discussed this in the Iran War podcast, this influence over the globe, and they start wars and they fight in these kind of middle zones. And what each of those superpowers is poised to do is be mainly US and China are to be the forefront in AI development. And if, as we're saying, this critical mass problem thing is occurring at the same time, then we have the new potential for automated warfare in these those places where the spheres of influence kind of compete or meet. Mm-hmm. You know, the Ukraine war, I saw a news reporter, a video of this group of Russian soldiers who a drone had come like right outside their bunker, and they came out and surrendered to the drone. Mm-hmm. And I think at this point, it's like Ukraine's drone operation, their automated drone operation, is like 90 to 95% effective. So it's fully automated from takeoff to flying to where the target is and like killing the target. Mm-hmm.
There's no kid on a joystick.
No, yeah, right. There's no one controlling it now. It can fully automated do that.
Yeah.
The Pope bringing out warfare in a modern time, like what even is warfare at that point, right?
Well, the whole like von Clausewitz kind of truism of war as a continuation of politics by other means becomes, it's like it's hard to even just, it's like everything is war or nothing is war. I mean, I don't. Right. I mean, it's like I guess what we mean by war at some point would just be the blowing up of things, mm-hmm. maybe. But it's like, well, we all know already that war has the psychological war, the propaganda war. He talks about the cyber war.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, war is not limited. This is the problem with the whole just war doctrine conversations. It's like in one sense we have this very simple understanding of war when we all imagine the storming of Normandy Beach in the World War II war, right? Mm-hmm. But then there's also this much more complex understanding of war, which is really just a form of exploitation, right? Like and so does war become total in the technocratic? I mean, I think the answer is sort of yes, right? I mean, the lines between police action and war collapse.
at the same time, the seamlessness of communication, like you're saying, is occurring. The seamlessness, and what Pope Leo says, the normalization of war.
Yeah.
That is, within a seamless apparatus, war is, of course.
It's just another behavior of the machine itself. So,
Yeah.
so it's like you have an objective. The objective is, let's say the objective is compliance to international commercial norms. I don't know. I'm just making things up.
Yeah.
Like that's the objective, because that's what makes the most money for whomever. Okay. And so you're deploying the communication apparatus, the financial apparatus, the economic apparatus. All of that is being deployed in order to maintain the global commercial norms that allow for the trade, whatever, and the globalization that we have. And then why wouldn't it just seamless? All of that is coercive in the sense of being manipulative and not and behaving in a way that is indifferent to the good of the people that are being manipulated, right? Mm. And so why wouldn't it just bleed seamlessly over to where places that are resisting need special nudges? You know, it's like we're nudging with everything else. Everything else is nudging, and they need the nudge. The next nudge is like blowing up a couple cars here or there for some of their leaders, and then maybe this or that. You know, it's like, and those are all just a part of the nudging apparatus.
Right. They might get posted on social media.
Why wouldn't that be the case? But the universalization of war is not, you don't want to think, oh, look, there's more and more wars. It's like, well, yeah, I guess so. But it's also that the logic of war is expanding into the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's not just.
Yeah, we talked about that with Aristotle as well. This like movement of war, the perpetual war outside and is a war also inside. Mm-hmm. So a perfection of the regime. And I want to bring in, Pope Leo says as much here. This is paragraph 207 regarding this kind of seamlessness of communication, normalization of war. Decisions now seem to be driven almost exclusively by economic calculations, justified through media distortions, manufactured enthusiasms, and dreams that inevitably shatter, generating frustration and further violence. When people come to believe that nothing is genuinely true and that principles are hollow words, then the fuse in their hearts is lit for new eruptions of intolerance and aggression.
Yeah. Yeah.
Manufactured enthusiasms, like we were saying, justified through media distortions. They're just economic calculations. So like war is just like, well, economically, this will help us. This will hurt our enemies.
Yeah.
You know, we'll blow you up.
Right.
It's like, and then if we need to justify it, we'll have the media do that for us. And
that'll work.
Yeah. And then we'll manufacture some enthusiasms. Yeah. And it'll magically work.
Which it does.
Well, and I also this line, because he references Hannah Arendt, Origins of Totalitarianism, which has been a book I wrote on it for my master's thesis, and that gullibility and cynicism go hand in hand. So because you can't make this distinction between true and false, you are cynical about anything that's said, but at the same time gullible for the most wild ideas.
Well, that's why you get this weird phenomenon of I'm so cynical about everything my political opponent says. Like the party I'm against, everything is a lie. But the party I'm a part of, they never lie.
They would never lie to me. Yeah.
It's like you're the most unbelievably gullible person and super cynical.
Super cynical. Yeah. When people come to believe that nothing is genuinely true and that principles are hollow words, and that principles are hollow words, meaning, like, and we've discussed this, like the weapon is the taking of the ideological language of the past, and even taking of like common good and hierarchy, authority, whatever, and making it like a simulation of what was previously said, or simulacra.
Yeah.
That's right. Of the real, of what is actually meant by the principles. Then they're just hollow words to be weaponized within the media space against your opponents. And then you're just ready for, like you said, new intolerance and aggression. You're ready for war. It's a war-like weaponization of truth.
Right. But what I'm afraid of is that what we'll see is that the need the need to rally the mass is waning. So that's like a relic of the 19th century and the 20th century. And that we already see it. I mean, you could see it with the kind of military adventures that Trump has embarked on and stuff where it's no longer necessary that you've rallied the masses public opinion and all. Like it becomes it becomes insignificant again. It's like the practical insignificance of that converges at the point at which the population no longer cares. You know what I mean? Like because it doesn't affect their lives anymore. You know, like so the communication.
They're not needed for the operation.
They're not needed for it, and it doesn't affect them, and so it just sort of fades from view. And you're just not really aware anymore of what kind of military activities are going on. It doesn't really matter. Right, yeah. And it's just not really a part of our political discourse. And now the realm of spontaneous order, the realm of where we argue and fight and everything, has gotten really a lot smaller. We no longer argue about wars. We argue now about whatever, TV programs. I mean, this is actually happening. I mean, maybe this is just like a weird anecdotal thing. I don't know. But I grew up as a kid listening, driving in the car and listening to Rush Limbaugh, right? And Rush Limbaugh was like talking about politics, like really talking about politics.
Yeah.
And now like he dies and then he's replaced by these two guys. Have you ever heard these guys? Clay Travis and Buck Sexton or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, they spend half their time talking about social media trends and TV shows. And like what's the best movie? And then like, let's get a talk back from wherever. And then like they have like social media and let's try to boost our YouTube likes. I mean, it is. And they talk about TV plot lines. These are the guys who took over Rush Limbaugh's show. Right. And it's like, oh my goodness, you can see it. You can see like the space of discourse becoming, we're still talking, we still have arguments, we're still whatever, and it's just like thump, 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 smaller, smaller, smaller.
Yeah. Oh, that old radio time. Even I during COVID, I had to drive a lot for work, and I would listen to Rush like there was something of a real. Famously just like smoke a cigar and talk for 3 hours.
Yep.
That was the show. And it was politics. And it was just going through, all the different things. He was, of course, wrong on a number of things. It wasn't that you had to believe all the content.
No.
But it was entertaining and it was interesting. And it wasn't a conversation that like he was tapping into this apparatus of communication and then commenting on that apparatus, which is what it basically is.
Which
now.
Is what's
it's
happening.
Basically like a
conversation about Twitter.
Exactly, a conversation about what other people are saying on Twitter, or conversation what other people are saying on other social media platforms.
Right.
And so it becomes an entire circular world.
That's what I mean by it being inside. Like it's no longer operating in the open space. Right. It's like now we're talking about.
People talking about
the spinning of the wheels inside the machine.
We're talking about the discourse or something.
Yeah.
It's and he has these sections also on education and the forming of the person. And I know we're probably we should move to subsidiarity and so forth, but I just get this sense of like the next generation coming up in this. Like I have a sister who's going to college. I actually have two sisters in college right now, and I just like I'm just sad because I can't imagine a college education now when all these colleges are incorporating AI pretty. They feel it's the necessity. They gotta, because they've already changed like job training things. They're training you with the AI systems, and you're not actually learning. The acceleration of the loss of literacy and the loss of education and development of the person converges terribly, but it converges with the seamlessness of this communication apparatus we're discussing, where not only is your conversation in a controlled space and manufactured, so forth,
But
you've lost the capacity to read and think for your own.
I think that
so it's loss on both ends.
I think that I think I talked about this on a podcast with Mark a while back, but the eclipse of literacy, and I don't mean being able to read a stop sign, a street sign. I mean the being able to sit down and read a book. It's been going on for decades. It's been rapidly accelerating, and now extremely accelerated into the AI era. I just don't think people have wrestled with the meaning of that. I mean, the inability to hold a complex argument and to riddle your way through a complex argument that's supported by evidence, which is what books do and books type stuff. I mean, it's just the end of democracy.
Yeah.
I mean, any
it's quickly becoming a relic.
Any fantasy that you're going to have some sort of a democratic political order, some sort of a Republican political order with people who are incapable of reading. And I hope people understand what I mean. I mean the thing that reading indicated, which was the ability to think through an argument and the evidence that was attached to the argument, right? Or to hold, for your attention span to be able to hold, even if it's a novel, right? To be able to hold a plot line. And therefore your memory is like a goldfish that forgets every 30 seconds, but you're actually holding together a narrative structure, right? And kind of imagining it. And so therefore you're capable of imagining large processes, historical narratives, like the possibility of different variations. All of those things are a part of the mind that can read books. And I'm telling you, like the eclipse of literacy, I just, yeah. Like it's civilizational.
It's the end of the long era of the book.
Yep.
As you were discussing previously in that podcast.
Right.
And what also another aspect that you brought out with the seamlessness of communication is that it becomes nature to you. So meaning that you can't distinguish that it's this seamless manufactured thing. Mm-hmm. Literacy is even even the classical understanding of what a liberal art, the liberal arts are, is to free you in order to think and not just have the ideas of what's told to you.
Right.
Right. To be able to evaluate, to critically read things, to have your world expanded. And, even Socrates' famous, I know nothing is like, that's the first movement is I need to recognize my ignorance in order to grow, to read something new. And
every time you walk into a library, you feel that way, right? I mean, this is what Mark and I talked about. Like every time you walk into a library and you realize I'll never read all these books, and you go, wow, I don't know anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we have a beautiful library here in Steubenville, and there was a time in which like the library was seen as this democratizing thing where like you go to the library to learn, to be, and regular people go there, learn new things. The world is expanded.
I mean,
and of course libraries have been mostly vacant for a while now.
Yep.
But at the same time, you can also walk into a library and kind of know the mind of the librarian. So like a good librarian knows what books should be brought there, what books should be read, and builds a library accordingly. And that shared space that space is gone. And I think, it's a relic of the past and a kind of reminder that we don't care about reading anymore, and we don't care about being illiterate people. I think we'll still be able to read like signposts and stuff. But I think beyond that,
we'll be texting.
I think beyond that, it'll be AI generated. Okay, so this is turned out to be fairly. This is just what's ahead of us, and I thank God for the Pope bringing this to light. What I want to go back to kind of close this discussion is those principles that he sets out in the first two chapters of Catholic social teaching, because Leo asserts, and we certainly believe it, that these principles are as timely as ever, are still true and need to be brought out again for our particular situation, no matter how dire it is, right? And particularly, maybe we could begin to look at subsidiarity as the counter to this, let's say, this technocratic progress, technocratic control.
Yeah.
So he begins with this, the subsidiarity that it is, decisions should be made at the level appropriate to it, the lowest level appropriate to it. So maybe we could begin with that kind of simple definition.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard because what we've been discussing. Okay. So a technocracy is the opposite of subsidiarity, right? So what a notion of subsidiarity advances is the idea of a complex world, right? Like an extremely complex world, real world, where it's not only that the physical complexity of the world is such that no one mind can control it, but that the complexity of the little worlds of families, communities, towns are themselves unfathomably complex. Right. So instead of having like one world that subsumes everything into it and simplifies it into fungible data points, right? Which is the technocratic drive, the world becomes the whole world becomes a sort of hierarchical mounting of microcosms. The whole cosm is a great expanse of microcosms where there are discourses happening. Right. So the reason why the smaller level things make decisions is because the smaller level things are discussing the true and the false, the good and the bad, the just and the unjust, and are making a world, right? Like they're living in a world, and the families are living in a familial world, which are then together living in worlds of communities where the families are talking to each other and governing their lives. And then those are coming into cities and so on. But that you can see the immense complexity of the diversity there, where every human person is situated within a reality that is formed by discourse that they are a part of, right? And in a world that's open to their discourse and into their movements, and that takes on the form of subsidiarity. That's what that's asserting. It's not like a policy recommendation. It's about when human beings are ordered in a way that, like the other parts of the encyclical, in a way that that supports integral human development, in a way that justifies or defends the dignity of the human person, all in a universal destination of goods. All of those, when those principles are lived, what you see is subsidiarity. Like it's like, oh, that's the form that society takes, right?
Exactly. It's not a project to be done or a moral. In a purely negative sense of like, let the lower levels take care of it.
Yeah,
it's actually what results from justice at each level.
Yeah,
right. So those decisions, there are authorities at each level that have a care for the good of those below them. And that shouldn't be superseded by higher levels for their own project.
Right. So there's sort of obvious morals. Like if I wield a lot of power, then if I'm a good Catholic person, which I hope anyone who wields a lot of power becomes, then you would say, well, I have the ability to meddle there, but I'm not going to. Right. Okay. So there's like a moral imperative in there of being just. I'm going to be a just man, which means I'm not going to meddle there. So that's there everywhere. I, as a father of my family, don't meddle in the internal affairs of my neighbor's family, right? Because that's subsidiarity. That's me being a just man. Well, that's his world. This is my world,
Right.
And now we both meddle in the affairs of the city because that unites us, the family next door to, you know what I mean? So there's a sense, the justice is there, the virtue of justice, where you see in others their dignity as a man, and that dignity gives them a space for action and therefore discourse, and that's, you're seeing subsidiarity.
And that space is open and free in a particular way, free for that creative decisions and opportunities, and the allowance of other people's reason and desires for the good and the true to be brought up into it, right?
And therefore learning, right? So it's the very fact that my neighbors, the families around me, have a space where they can be different from me. The very fact that that's true is the reason why when I meet them on the yard mowing our lawns and we have a conversation about the city, what's the city going to do about this? What's the city, right? The next higher level. It's the reason why our conversation is political. It's because we are in a position where we are sharing a discourse about what should be done from positions of freedom, right? And not from positions of prior conformity. Okay, so that the whole notion of any sort of democratic, again, and I don't mean that, again, of course, you know what I mean, like any sort of like of politics as being ordered to the common good of the people requires exactly that kind of social order where the people are discussing with each other from positions of coherence and of diversity, like different positions. Therefore, they can have a conversation, right, about substantive matters. So subsidiarity is prerequisite to an open field of communication.
Yes. It's to step back kind of philosophically, like the differences are meant to remain, but to be ordered together.
Yeah,
right?
into a higher level of order.
Yeah, and not collapse. Not collapse into a unity. It's you allow the differences that are, at every level, at a local level, at a city level, at the highest national level or global level. You allow those differences not to be collapsed into each other into a singular, like we've been talking about, this continuous, seamless world of communication.
Right.
You allow that complexity to be there, and it allows the human person to flourish because they are dialoguing in their difference. They are learning in their difference.
It allows for the immense complexity of the world to be brought into the social world without closing the open world down, right? So like the cosmos itself is this open space for movement, but we have to live in it, which means we build smaller worlds, right? That live in that cosmic world, the big world, but that smaller world is its commission or its drive is to expand into truth, into the bigger cosmos. That expansion requires sophistication. Sorry. Of exploration and discourse. So Thomas talks about reason requires people discovering things and then sharing with each other, right? Like different people discovering different aspects about the world and new things, new ideas that then are being shared with each other in discourse in the different levels in the hierarchy, which allows for the movement of the whole deeper into truth and justice, right? But the technocratic is the opposite. The technocratic closes down. What it wants to do is make the outside world non-existent, right? Like it doesn't exist, right? Rather than being the space that we're moving ever further into. Right? And that's why, it's homogeneity, lockdown, conformity, ever smaller space for discourse.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
and this goes with the infinite dignity of the human person, like each human person being created directly by God. Which is the Christian claim, and
it's madness, man. And it's unbelievable.
Well, right,
I mean, it's quite the claim.
Yeah, that every person is uniquely created.
Yeah,
and therefore and has their own, John Paul II on human dignity and the human person, that the person has this incomparable worth and that provides for this I think subsidiarity and the difference of each person and their mode of flourishing, and that you can't collapse it all into a singular system. The allowing of that person to reveal their difference, expand into their world in their own mode and within their own abilities, and not to say the abilities are all equal. Or that
no, but they're each person's they're
right,
theirs.
exactly. It's
Whatever
theirs.
Yeah.
And the technocratic, and so that movement is open and expanding, like truly expanding. The technocratic is the one in which it's collapsing it, and in fact, making it more the case that there's a mechanization of those lower and tending towards this slavery, right? So the mechanization of the reason and the abilities of those below them. Now, what's interesting with AI is that mechanization can, doesn't require all the difficulty it required previously. Like you now
don't need the bureaucracy.
Yeah, you don't need the bureaucracy to manage everyone in the same way. Nonetheless, I think subsidiarity and the Pope bringing it out in these first two chapters, but throughout the encyclical.
Yeah. One of the things that's important is that the way the encyclical is structured is that again, like we started out this conversation, when we see subsidiarity here, we have to now say, so we're looking at power, not states. So this isn't like the government shouldn't get so big, right? It's like, no, like the way the encyclical is framed is we have these principles, and now we're going to talk about these non-state realities, and those principles apply to them, right? So like subsidiarity applies, like the judgment of a subsidiarity lens, like to look at something through the lens of subsidiarity applies when we look at Google, right? Like, is that a just thing? So now you start talking about structures of sin. So you start you start talking about social justice or justice as a thing, and it becomes no longer justice as mediated through just like a liberal lens of like whether or not contracts are being violated, but it's now a question of justice as like whether or not the power that's being wielded by that entity is appropriate, like to the flourishing of the layers of society below it,
flourishing of the whole,
flourishing of the whole, and that's
a whole different
thing.
person.
That's a whole
I just get the sense that taking these two chapters at the beginning on social doctrine and also showing how the social encyclicals have been building this is because of the Pope is signaling that and is saying that we really need these principles for our time. Like, as we've been explaining, the seamless apparatus that's being built. Some people have said, is the Pope's thing just like a moral use of AI, individual kind of this way or that way, which is such a silly interpretation. But
I mean, that stuff is there. I get why people think that way, I guess. Mm-hmm. But again, it's like the people who are. What am I trying to say? People naturally want to know what they're allowed to do or not allowed to do. People who want to be good try to figure out what the rules are. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But that's not the real discussion that needs to be had here. It's not about which actions are moral or not moral. We need to be talking about the structural significance of the historical movements that we are in the midst of.
Yeah. What world
is being built here?
Exactly.
So
and
like
at
actually being built. Like,
and at that we arrive with the Tower of Babel and the rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem framing that he begins with, is that we have to talk about structures, because structures like the walls that get rebuilt, they are then walls that exist in the world. And the Tower of Babel, it's not like, oh, well, we stopped at the third level of the Tower of Babel. Like, that structure gets built over time and is therefore an artifact in the world. And it's a question of, as John Paul, and actually in the recent book we published, by David L. Schindler, the introduction by Ruben Slife, the structures of sin. Mm-hmm. Those are structures in the world. They're not just like this. We're not talking about moral decisions for the individual. We're talking about a structure that then,
it's a part of the landscape.
Part of the landscape.
It's like a mountain
Human
that's
action
sitting there.
It's
like we now live in a world where that rigid thing is there. Mm-hmm. That like it has substance.
And the Pope is giving us the tools with the principles to render judgment upon that structure. And I mean, who else on the world scale is saying these critiques? It seems like everyone's bought in, or even if they're critical, they're not really, there's not really much of a pushback. But the Pope has stepped in and said, no, we have to judge the world we're building by these principles. Is it serving the common good? Is it causing development of the whole human person? Is it safeguarding human dignity? Is it leading to the universal destination of all goods? Is it producing a structure of subsidiarity? Does it cause solidarity and fraternity among people?
Is there more
These
war
are
or
what
less?
we must judge it by.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think it's a particular time for Catholics to, it's a very important time for Catholics to like be saying this, be trying to do it. Like,
and I just think it's time to stop with the like, well, I could imagine it being good. Well, if I tweaked the world this way or that way, or if we only used it to read X-rays and we only did it this and we only, then I could imagine. It's like, no, fine, okay. But maybe we should talk about what's actually being built. And what it's actually for, and how they're actually using it, and not about how we could conceivably.
Let's don't try to create more neutral moral spaces.
Yeah, let's actually judge the world we live in. Let's think about it.
Yeah, there's a parable I really love in the Gospels of when Christ says, "You could say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it'll be done for you," which is a strange saying. But then later he says, you could say to this mountain, be taken up and cast into the sea, and it'll be done for you. And this is to the apostles, princes of the church. And of course the mountain has the significance of kingdoms. And so move from here to there is like convert, but also go be destroyed into the sea, right? And I think we as Christians kind of forget we have that kind of world power with the gospel given revelation. Like I see it with the encyclical of, you bring revelation out to the nations and you say, do you realize you're building the Tower of Babel? Right? Like this should be taken up and cast into the sea. And so that maybe seems too prophetic, but I think for the principles here, it's time for us to learn these, to take them seriously, to like really educate ourselves. Like reading really is becoming a superpower for people. And then try to navigate it from here.
Yep, I agree.
And not be naive about it.
Yeah. 100%.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
This is great. So a few things. So this is the beginning of our series on Catholic social teaching, our podcast series. So we're officially starting it. And we're going to be going through, this will probably be a long series.
I think so.
But we're currently writing a book on Catholic social teaching. And we're going to be going through terms like power, the common good, these ideas, hierarchy. We're going to probably episodes on subsidiarity, also including other parts from the social encyclical tradition, which I have all of the documents here, my big stack. So if you haven't already, it's a good time to subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Spotify. Also, we have another magazine coming on AI. So is our second look at on AI. So I'll be writing something for that, and others from New Polity and from related people. So if you'd like to get that issue, you subscribe to New Polity magazine, newpolity.com/magazine. All right. Thanks, Andrew.